Yeah, thank you very much for this invitation. It's also quite good to see quite a lot of familiar names in the list of people listening. Also, some old colleagues are really nice, and yeah, honored to speak to you. We just finished our EIE, European Association of Agricultural Economics conference seminar on resilience. And then you asked me to speak about monitoring the resilience of farming systems. So if I don't know it by now, how to monitor resilience, then when should it be? After these 3 days of seminar and thinking and talking about it with colleagues. So this is based on 4-year experience of the SURE-Farm project. So this presentation builds on the SURE-Farm consortium work from the past 4 years. So actually very nice to present it to you. I focus in this presentation on your question, the monitoring of resilience. So I leave obviously out a lot of things. Purely the monitoring, that is what I try to focus on. Well, resilience, it's not a simple concept. It's latent and it's quite complex. And sorry to say that, well, it is like it. It's not a simple, easy measurable and easy monitored concept. So keep that in mind while listening and thinking about this resilience question. Well, practice, therefore, is that you often see very narrow focus, cherry picking on some of the things that you can measure and then say that this is about resilience. Unfortunately, this is, well, only part of the story then, because there is many things to say about resilience and many things that could and should be measured and that you should have insight in to speak about resilience. Well, if it's so multidimensional, how to monitor it then I'm happy to show you the SURE-Farm approach. We structured our analysis in 5 systematic steps. We look at farming systems. That is what the first picture says. Resilience of what, to what, for what purpose, number of capacities, and these are very much in line with the previous speaker. And especially the 5th one, I come back to that also, the resilience attributes. So what of these can you monitor, measure, assess, can maybe even make alert systems for? But obviously that is how well is the delivery of private and public goods going? How is that performing? Not only income, of course, and food production, but also other public goods that are relevant. What is the capacities that we see? Is it only robustness, or is there something more that is underneath the skin, so to say, or is it purely robustness, the upper picture? Then you can also measure resilience attributes, and that is actually a very interesting yet also quite complex part of monitoring resilience. I'll come back to that. But first, before you start to monitor, we need to decide what is your scale. Is it the single farm? Is it the food system? Is it maybe at consumer level, the shelves in the supermarket? We decided to focus on the farming system. And as the green block or the green circle here shows, it's not only the farm, but also the neighboring and the mutually related other value chain actors, for instance, neighbors, accountancy firms, well, very much context dependent, who's in that farming system, but it's more than the farm. Also, it's important to realize that resilience, well, it's not about the standard package of challenges. It's not only about low prices or animal disease or plant disease. No, it's about potentially multiple challenges. And unfortunately, they also differ between sectors and between regions. And yet, maybe even more unfortunate, it's also about dealing with unknown crises that you now don't even think about. And of course, we had the luck, if you can say it like that, last year to experience the lockdowns due to COVID And well, that was at that time really an unknown. It was an event that, well, no one could think of that it would be that like that in Europe. So this is the challenges that that resilience talks about. So it's not just one thing; it's multiple things. It varies. It's like sometimes people call it a monster, but I don't know how you call it. It's about this. What's on the slide? Well, then I had these 3 circles of functions. Then 3 circles about what can you then monitor about resilience. The first circle, the first red circle I showed, was about these delivery of private and public goods. How well is that going? And you can do this measurement. The example here is for profitability. It's the old-fashioned example, I would say, but it's just an example. You could also measure other private and public functions of the farming system. You could look at resistance, number of shocks that the system faces, recovery rate after shocks. That is doable. That is doable. We did that based on statistics. You can draw lessons from that, and this is one way of monitoring resilience. You'll see each of the monitoring ways has some limitations, but this could be done. And don't forget, it's not only about profit, but also about other functions of agriculture. The second monitoring could be done on the how is the resilience capacities? What is the status from them? Is it only about robustness or also about the other two? If we looked at the responses of farming systems in the first wave of the lockdowns in spring 2020, it was very much about coping, about robustness, for instance. Some adaptations visible. What you can do then is you can look at the perceived capacities. You may think, perceptions. Yeah, it's because of the latent character of resilience. Also, the perceived capacity of dealing with crisis is very important. So you can measure perceived capacities. You could also derive it, infer it. That's also what we did in SURE-Farm, from the responses and strategies that you see happening. And you can again look at statistical analysis and simulation to get insight into these 3 capacities. So that is the second monitoring that you could do about resilience. I have a third one. A lot of text on the next slide, sorry for that. You could monitor the status of resilience attributes. And if I would have to put my money on something, I would go definitely for this. It's maybe the most complicated one, but it's measuring, I would say, the heart of resilience, because these resilience attributes are not scratching the surface, like if you measure income and food production and what I had as the first monitoring option. It is really looking to the system characteristics, not only from the farming system, but also from the enabling environment. It is, for instance, about the diversity of policies. Are the policies going in all directions of resilience? Is there redundancy of labor? Is there redundancy of crops? Is there care for local resources? Is there balance with local resources? As I say, I would go for this, but I immediately also say it's the most challenging one to monitor, but definitely part of the whole picture. So we did this in SURE-Farm for 11 farming systems. We did these 3 ways of monitoring resilience. And well, if you don't know whether you can read this, diverse systems facing different challenges, also facing different consequences of the corona crisis last year. So very different systems. And we analyzed them from 2017 till actually now. Okay, and then we use this structured SURE-Farm approach. Here you see these in the upper left corner, again, these 5 steps that I showed before. So every time, whatever we do, we try to investigate these 5 steps. Also, right-hand side, upper part, we do this not only from the economics perspective, but also with colleagues from policy, from farm demographics, from agricultural practices perspectives. And we think that that is also a necessity. When you measure, monitor resilience, don't come only up with my economic colleagues, so to say, but it's broader than that. It should be broader than that. And remind, it's on the lower part of the slide, this context specificity, because when you measure, for instance, the delivery of private and public goods, you have to acknowledge the local needs, the local infrastructure, the local ecological circumstances, for instance. And these are very different in the Altmark in East Germany compared to the middle part of Italy and compared to the Netherlands again in the north. So that's what you have to account for and be aware of, at least. And we would also say that we always go with mixed methods. That's what we did, and that's what I would recommend for the monitoring. So not purely based on statistics, but well, think about my comment about the perception of resilience. Yeah. Okay, so there were 3 suggestions for monitoring. I showed how we worked with it in SURE-Farm for these 11 farming systems. And if I then pick up on the conclusions and recommendations that I find relevant in the context of the monitoring question that you asked me, I would say these 3 things. The first one, think about measuring and monitoring these resilience attributes. The most difficult one, but also a very relevant one. We did these structured analysis, including how it all worked out in the first wave of the lockdowns. And it comes out that these resilience attributes and therefore the system design really matters. So the conclusion there is that being impacted by a crisis is not just a matter of bad luck. There is design there. And that is what we need to monitor if we talk about resilience. We also realized that these systematic resilience assessments that we did, it points at system vulnerabilities, and it really points at system vulnerabilities because that was also seen in the corona crisis. And so therefore this knowledge can directly feed into stress tests of farming systems, food systems. We also realized that if transformations are needed, and that's very much in line with what was said previously about the seafood sector, for instance, if transformations are needed to deal with future pandemics or with these concerns that we have about these transnational value chains, more work is needed to stimulate the transformative capacity, not only in the system, but also in the enabling environment. Easily said, not so easy to do, but these are important findings in the context of the monitoring. Then I also thought about some potential traps when monitoring. I thought about 3 of them. The first one on the left-hand side I already showed. It's so easy to make the narrow focus and to measure income stability or recovery rates of income. Not that that is easy, but that is doable. And we could then easily say, okay, we measure resilience and it's going fine. And yeah, that's what we do. But that would be a really narrow and limited view on resilience. That's the first trap. The second one is that there is no silver bullet. So there is not a single indicator that can capture the whole story of resilience. And we need multiple indicators. We have developed multiple indicators, and I think that is also needed. So no silver bullet, unfortunately. And then also beware of these blind spots. It's blind spots. It's quite difficult to think about futures and about challenges that we may face, and especially then to think through and to make actions that are in line with that and that are able to respond to that. And we realized that also as researchers, we have these blind spots. So it's not only in the field and maybe in policy making, but also as researchers, you easily have them. We know about these shared socioeconomic pathways for European agriculture. We know about them. But then when we do our research, it's not so straightforward, and you often have difficulties really incorporating them in your research, because it's also pretty human to find it difficult. I'm not so sure whether the questions in the chat are for me, but let's look at that a bit later. So these are potential traps when monitoring, and maybe there's more, but these are the three that I realized from our work on farming systems in Europe. I selected some references. Last summer we had a special issue in the EuroChoices magazine, totally focusing on measuring and on the resilience of farming systems in Europe. So enjoy reading that if you have time. And otherwise, for now, thank you for having me in this lunch part of the workshop. Very nice to be part of it. Thanks a lot.